Welcome back to our next session on how data shapes the future of shipping. In this session, we're joined by John Dale, who's Non-Executive Director of V.Group and also at Amadeus. He's going to be moderating this session. We're also joined by Katie Adamson again, who you know from the first session, as well as James Bradford, who's Global Head of Technical at V.Group, and also Stephen McFarlane, who's V.Group's Information Systems Director. So as John's moderating, I'll hand over to you to get things started.
All right, thank you. Hopefully we'll bring today a thought-provoking conversation around data and digitalization. It's definitely a topic that I think all of us could sit up here and talk for a few hours on. But being able to bring innovation and agility to an industry that's been reliant on legacy systems and tradition over a long period of time is an exciting, really future topic, I think, for us. So Katie, I wanted to toss you the first question. Do you believe that maritime industry is relying on intuition much more than data?
I think we already, always have up until now, because that was all we had. Intuition was, was what we had more than data. But actually, I think both of them are important. I think it maybe speaks to people who were joining us for the opening discussion with Graham and Renee. We kind of touched on this, which is that, yes, data is incredibly important, but there are use cases for data. And actually, the important thing is how you interpret that data. It's getting insight from data, understanding the provenance of data, where it comes from, what conclusions it can and it can't support. These are human activities. So yes, data is incredibly important, but getting operational insight out of that data is something that you still need a human to do. And, we talk about intuition. We have an interesting relationship with the future as humans. It's a very, very central relationship. So we see all sorts of patterns and coincidences, and, we feel things. And actually, this is all very valid, and we shouldn't just discount that. But equally, if you have really good bulletproof data as well, then it means you can balance the two things. So you don't want one or the other. You want a really smart combination of the two, in my view.
Right. So Stephen, is this a challenge that you still struggle with, and getting folks to adopt data and making data-driven decisions?
It's something we've got to put a concentrated effort into making sure that people use the combination of the skills they have and the data they have. And I think it's a journey that the industry is on at the moment. Data is really, really important. And our seafarers are very skilled. They know how to react in their circumstances that they're in, but they've also got to know how to use the data, when to use the data. So I think it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we're facing head on, and it's a journey. But I think it's a journey that's only going to merge these two together.
And James, is this something that you've seen change over time?
Yes, maybe to touch on a couple of the comments made, intuitive-driven management has been around for a long, long time, and it is changing, and it's refreshing to see V.Group driving data to push its business forward. I recently read a report from Pricewaterhouse, and they summed it up with something like 35% of decision making is made by judgment and experience. 35% is sharing a view with a group, and then the balance is take a look at data to see if it confirms what our opinion is. And I think with the challenges that our industry faces, within the markets we serve, with the environmental compliance that we are striving to meet and comply with, data plays a very, very important role in allowing us to measure our performance. In fact, I'll use another word. It's to sum up our reality at this point in time against the goal that we've set ourselves for the company. And any delta between that reality and that goal, data, hopefully, should guide us to potential options for finding a way forward. So to answer your question, yes, I've seen change. And I'll touch on the previous panel's comment, change has to accelerate in moving forward. But in that acceleration, we have to take on board, if you will, take with us, the core business, the core operation, so that the process that we're asking them to comply with, that they adopt. And so like, if we can assure that adoption, then we can essentially assure success at the end of the project.
I think the other thing is that we're now at a position where we can give almost near real-time data back to the ships.
Yes.
So it's they're not always looking back. It's not hindsight all the time. We're actually giving them data back to the edge. So we're supporting that decision making, where we're giving a structure around that intuition that says I can be data informed.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the key element here, and that's a path forward. Okay, so as they're faced with challenges, looking at how they optimize the operation on board the vessel, the data is actually there now to help them do that.
That's an interesting point, Stephen, is obviously there's decisions that are made at the corporate level, right? And those are very important, but you're talking about a very large asset at sea that a decision needs to be made very quickly. From I guess a technology perspective, how do you position the data architecture and the technology to be able to take advantage of this type of paradigm shift?
Yeah. So I think, John, I mean, the way that I look at it, and being an ex-seafarer, right? So I understand, what it's like in the onboard situation. I also want to understand that if all you think you're doing is reporting continuously and sending all that information ashore for somebody else to eventually review and come back to you, it's not helping you. It's not adding value. So I'm a great believer in, as much as possible, doing a lot of that analysis on board. If we have to do it ashore, send it back very, very quickly, within hours. So putting that back at the edge, okay? It's that whole, you've got that management team on board the ship, you've got your management team in the office. They should be looking at the same information. And actually, by the time that the office has looked at that information, the onboard team have already made a decision. Now, whether that's around vessel performance, weather, what they're doing that day, it's giving that information back to them and empowering that team, giving them the tools on board to understand why they're reporting, and they go, I know why I'm reporting, because I get that information back at my fingertips, and I feel part of that digital ecosystem.
Fantastic. So from a technology perspective, obviously there's been a lot of a revolution, if you will, in the industry, from data, utilization of real-time data, and now being able to take large amounts of data, collate, organize, and use big data analytics. So being able to churn through massive amounts of data that was very difficult, years ago. How do we position really for the challenges and adopting big data analytics in the future, Katie?
I think there are a couple of issues around this. I think one of them is that it's become such a buzzword, big data, and the idea that you just gather as much data as you possibly can, and then you sift through it because you can find a nugget, that's going to really be important. Well, that's great if you're a Silicon Valley tech giant. That's really good because the nugget you find could be worth billions. And you can afford to store all this data and have all this infrastructure around data analytics. But actually, most companies can't. And the reality is that what we call tech debt is a real growing problem, that you've got so many legacy systems in so many companies around the world, and I'm talking not just in shipping, around every industry, that people are struggling to invest in anything new. And this great promise of artificial intelligence is going to come and solve everything. Well, a lot of people are finding, that it's not really solving things, because the reality is you need a very strong use case. And you also need to know why you're collecting data, which speaks, to the point just made. There is no point in just gathering everything, but there's a balance to be had here, because a lot of people don't get anything at all. We did a survey with Vodafone a couple of years ago, and we discovered that 90% of all the data generated on board the average vessel never comes ashore, and that's an average of 57 gig every month, and only 10% of it ever comes ashore. But there's a reason for that historically, because it's been over SATCOMs, it's been incredibly expensive, and those costs are coming down. But here's the other thing we found, was that most vessels spend 60% of their time in coastal waters or alongside in port, which means they could be using cheaper LTEs, cellular, So actually, I think what we really need is a wholesale, reevaluation of how we approach, technology, and not technology for the sake of it, not just because you're told you can have all of this bandwidth, because the more bandwidth you have, the more you'll use. That's just one of those things. But actually, where do we need data? And I really think the point, that both of you are making is absolutely right. This should be about decision support. I mean, you're from the airline business. I mean, what do they say? You've got a problem in the cockpit. There's no point talking to the ground because they can't do anything. And it's kind of a little bit the same with vessels, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You need that data. I think somebody talked about small data. I think, you guys in one of your white papers, I thought that was so interesting. Because that's right. It's about the immediate, impactful, actionable data that is useful at that time. And that's not an easy thing to do, to have an infrastructure that enables that. But I think that should be the goal.
Yeah, and honestly, from a parallel between shipping and airline, there are lots of similarities. You have very legacy industries, systems that are really difficult to change, old data architecture perhaps, limited number of people that understand how the system was built. So these are challenges that aren't unique to shipping, but they are challenges. And being able to determine how you move past the technical debt, to be able to innovate and have an agility so that when a problem comes, you can, Stephen's able to motivate his team quickly to make a change, that they're able to make the change and not hindered by the system. That's definitely an opportunity from a big data perspective, but it's not an easy journey. James, from your perspective, what are the opportunities you see from a business standpoint of being able to adopt a big data or AI framework?
I think the opportunities are immense, and you could look at opportunities with onboard management, organizational management, and client contract management. If you have data that can be trusted, it sets you on a bedrock, a solid ground that in a commercial sense you can take to a client and reassure them that this is how their assets are performing. And from that demonstration of sort of utilizing data out of it, over time will become trust from that client towards you. So there are commercial benefits that will eventually come towards the company by utilizing data in that set. With regards to regulatory compliance, day-to-day sort of like running of assets, 600 plus, the data that we receive to monitor the performance of vessels, so that we know the reality that we're living in with regards to the compliance that is set up against us. And maybe against us is the wrong word to use, but it is set up for us to comply with. We can measure that, and we can hold ourselves accountable, and we can take proactive action to make any corrections should that be necessary. And again, it extends beyond the operational and the technical because it comes into crew welfare, which is a big thing today, making sure that our crews remain socially connected from ship to shore. And I believe that by utilizing data systems and the conduits that they demand, it can only enhance life on board for our crews as well.
Stephen, what opportunities do you see from a technology perspective of being able to unlock new efficiencies with big data and analytics technologies?
One of the points from James that really rings a bell with me, though, is getting your data to the point where you can trust it. Okay. Yeah. So if you can get your data to the point where you can trust it, and that might not be 100%, but it's somewhere up in the 90s, and you feel your data's good. So putting a big effort into making sure your systems of record are well entered, they're managed, and they're reliable is the starting point. So I think you're absolutely right there. And if you can get to that point, you then have that opportunity to say, well, I can start to bring this data together. And I think the real key here is to bring your data assets together. So whether that's machinery data comes streaming off an engine, whether that's an inspector passing by a winch and noticing there's a problem on that, and then that same winch getting recorded 3 weeks later in a different type of inspection report, bringing all that data together and then being able to use the technologies to say, hang on, we're getting a common thread here. That winch is a recurring problem. So what's the issue there? Then how does the data help you with that? Well, maybe the data tells you that you've got a mechanical problem in that winch. Maybe the data tells you you've got a problem with the ship staff not being able to get to that winch because of weather, but it allows you to be proactive. So big data, or having the ability to normalize your data, have an ontology that allows you to look across your systems. Now in V.Group, we're in a really fortunate position because we basically have one core system that covers all of these elements. So we're not bringing it in from different systems, but even if you're bringing it in from different systems, normalize it, get that ontology that allows you to bring that data together. I think you can really extract value.
Well, that's a huge advantage of having a system and spending all that time working on it. And I think it really positions future initiatives from I guess, not as much of an exciting topic, data security, but a very necessary one. What are some of the big risks that you see today, Katie?
Well, I think this links directly to the big data thing, because what we've seen over the last 10 years is, all of these big locked data ecosystems, from social media to, all sorts of things. The idea being that you collect as much data as you can, you build a big moat around it, and then you force everybody to pay you to live their lives. But there's a really big problem with that, which is it turns you into a massive target. Because if you've got lots of data, then you just got to hit this one organization, and you've unlocked all this data, which of course has enormous amounts of value for for criminals, etc. And of course now we're bringing all this OT online, which was never designed to be brought online. We're seeing huge amounts of state-sponsored cyber attacks all over the world. They're hitting companies, and actually this is an area I think that is going to be increasingly difficult for multinational organizations. It's difficult enough for organizations that are only within one jurisdiction, but if you are trying to run data networks and make data available and trusted and all these other things we have to do using networks around the world, that is going to be, as I say, a strategic issue. The kind of technology that we've all invested in the past, we've been pretty technology agnostic. You could have anything from anywhere. But you probably heard last year, in China, companies are being told they needed to buy Chinese PCs, for example. We are seeing, the likelihood of a bifurcation, a splitting of the internet, broadly kind of east and west. And this is going to bring up problems, as I say, strategic technology, investment and management problems that we just haven't faced before.
Yeah, different localization rules on where you can store the data.
Exactly. Right? And things like federation, because this is, I think where we're moving to now is saying we don't want to store data, we want data to be available, right? We actually need the availability of trusted data. And that's a different conversation. So Steve's talking about pushing things out to the edge. Yeah, that's a great idea. Don't haul the data back at all. If you don't need to, let the machinery work on it on the edge, and if there's an exception, fine, bring the data back and deal with it. So this is a slightly different conversation then. And what you talk about then is not how do we collect all this data and pool it somewhere, but how do we orchestrate a data ecosystem? And that's, I think, when things like federation and blockchain may be useful in actually making sure you're not holding data where you don't need it, but you're making the data you do need available.
Blockchain is an interesting topic. Stephen, is this a topic you see taking hold in the shipping industry, and where do you see the benefit?
I mean, I think we're already seeing it getting used in the freight side of the shipping. But I think I think maritime's going to go through a big change over the next. I don't know how long that's going to be. It's probably a 15, 20-year cycle, right? But I actually think as the we've talked this morning about the initiatives from the IMO. We've talked about the environmental impact on shipping. I think as we move away from that linear economy to that more circular economy, blockchain is going to become a real big part of that, because actually we're going to have to understand digitally the cost of moving those goods around the world. So those raw materials that move from Brazil to China that are then turned into product and then shipped again, the shipping industry will eventually, I think, have to be able to report that. And that's a real challenge. That's a step change in reporting that's going to hit the industry. And it might well also completely change the way that ships are fixed and chartered, and possibly moving further how actual ships are operated and even designed. So, and the only way to do that really is probably through sort of blockchain and a federation of that data. So being able to share that data, because you're actually potentially going down to quite low levels of detail, which you've got to share. So I think it's going to come in. Not convinced we're ready for it. But I think we can be part of the discussion, which is a key thing as it comes in. But it's definitely going to come into the industry and affect it right across the board.
Do you think the industry's not ready from is it a technical question, or is it more of a resource question, or a combination?
I think it's more of the design of the industry at the moment. So I think it's more a design of the industry. I think we're just going to. I think the change is going to be rapid, and we've got to be part of that discussion and be ready for that, because digital is going to be a big driver. The ability to report is going to be a huge driver in that, and it's going to be sort of real time reporting, greater tracking of vessels, the security around that. So it's going to impact us now, but I think it's going to probably take 10, 15 years to really impact the industry, but I see that a direction it's moving in.
Okay. From a resource perspective, what are some of the difficulties and challenges in attracting resources that have the technology, acumen, and desire to utilize technology?
I think what I've found recently is we've brought quite a lot of data scientists into our organization, and actually we're actually finding they really like this business. They data scientists like data, right? And shipping's got plenty of data.
Oh yeah.
So actually, there's a real opportunity there to get really good data scientists on board into your organization, and let them loose on the data, build and develop them. So actually, I think we can attract the right people. It's an industry where a lot of people don't think that when they set out in their career they're going to end up in this industry. But I think there's the opportunity, and what I do find is that data scientists work really, really well with that sort of technical engineering side of a business. So James, looking at his technical solutions, working with the data science. So I think it's a nice mix of resources. I think the other thing to think about is, if I go back, even just as recent as maybe 15 years ago to conferences, people would ask me, how can you put technology in ships? People don't know how to use computers. Actually, our ship staff and our office staff are ahead of that curve at the moment. So actually, they're ready for greater technology and much more mobile type solutions on board the vessels. So I think there's a great opportunity there to catch up with the ship staff and give them the right tools to do their job. And I think what I've seen over the last few years, very rapid adoption of VSAT technology. Mm-hmm. So we've seen a flip in our fleet from probably 50-50 VSAT and fleet broadband being not particularly fast as a connection method, to that starting to flip. So as we see the vessels becoming more connected, we've got to react and give that digital workforce the right digital tools and the right training to support it, because they're actually they're ready for that. So I think from the shore side, bringing more data science into the organization, giving the business users better business tools to allow them to do a lot of their own analysis, because again, they're coming out of their universities and they've got the right skill sets, and getting that mobile workforce on the vessel, mobile tools, so they can actually do their job very, very effectively.
Yeah. Do you find that there's difficulty in having the mariners on board trust the data and use it to make decisions?
I don't think so personally. I think because of the effort we've put into the ecosystem and the systems we've got, I actually see that I believe they do trust it. Actually, I believe they. I'll go back to that original point I made. What we see from the feedback because we ask them every time we roll out new technology, how have you found this new feature? The feedback we get is, thanks for giving us more information, right? Now, if we didn't give them information back, I think they'd be going, why do we keep reporting? So actually what we're seeing is a high level of adoption, because they know why they're entering the data, because I think it's helping them. It's giving that, it's giving them digital informed or data informed tools, which means that they can make decisions informed. It's giving them master and oversight that you maybe never had before. You'd have to go and knock on the chief engineer's cabin and say, well, what's happening on this? Where's the spares today, chief? Well, actually, in our ships, the captain can open up his dashboard and know the spares at that instant in time. So we're actually seeing them pushing us, give us more. So I think that's great.
And John, that's a cultural shift, isn't it? I think this is the interesting point about all of this, that when you give people visibility and transparency, because let's face it, in all organisations, you got your own position, you got stuff that's yours, yeah. And what happened in many digital transformation programs, that people came and said, we'll put all this digital technology and you can share everything and it'll solve all this. And of course it didn't, because it didn't actually address the cultural shift, which was this is why we're sharing this. This is the opportunity. This is what's going to improve if you're able to have this kind of information at your fingertips. And what it tends to drive then is more transparency, more engagement, more collaboration. But you can't just expect the technology to do that. And what I'm hearing actually as an outsider to V.Group is you've actually taken the time to make that cultural change, which makes the technology a tool that can be used, as opposed to just giving people technology and saying, there we are, you can do everything now. And people go, we didn't ask for this.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that, and it's a good point that you touch on with regard to culture movement, because in doing so and utilising data in the way that we have, it removes that siloism, and so people do start working together effectively as a united team, if you will.
Well, change can be also a little scary.
Yes.
And so how do you manage change in organizations?
I mean, that's an absolutely massive question, but I mean, we had the word agile mentioned. I think Renee mentioned it earlier, and this is actually a really big part of this, because what we've tended to have in the past is a command and control, attitude to organisations for the last 100 years. And now with all these things that we're discussing, things are transparent, we can collaborate. Obviously, that kind of changes things. And what you really want is, cross-functional, autonomous teams that can see a problem and solve it quickly. And I think this comes back to another thing I mentioned earlier, how are we going to create value? And this is where we start. This is a big shift for the industry, because what we've tended to do is talk about data in terms of operational improvements and cost reductions. But what we're now talking about is data as an opportunity to create new value. And for a lot of years, people say, well, you can't create value on the vessel, can you? All you can do is drive down cost. But actually what we're now seeing is, with this cultural change, well, maybe you can actually create value on that vessel as part of a circular economy where, people feel empowered to actually take on things that otherwise are too siloed. This is outside my remit, I'm not allowed to be involved in this. And I think ashore as well, the agile agenda, not to just have people in silos, but to try and be agile and move and adapt and capture opportunity. This is linked to technology, because technology can underpin that ability to collaborate. So I think, change management, we're human beings, we're used to change, that's what we do well. We've forgotten that. I think, we get very stressed about what we need to change are our systems, and system change, that's difficult, but then we are the system. True.
So a question for you, Stephen. Obviously when you're creating a big data environment, you have the ability now to get insights out of the data, the next step is being able to use prescriptive and proactive management on the AI side. Is this something that you see as a trend that can, from a technology perspective, bring benefits to the industry, and what concerns you about the technology and the infrastructure that you need to build to support that type of environment?
Yeah, no, I think there's the opportunity there. And what we're doing at the moment in terms of the AI stack, we're exploring. We're certainly doing machine learning, and we're doing some deep learning on our historical data. And I think where we're heading for is to bring that data back into the day-to-day operations. So learn from the data we've got to inform the decisions we're going to make. And actually, looking at factors around incidents or events, learning from that historically, we're now seeing the benefit of quite a few years of relatively clean data. That's helping us bring that information into informing us where our vessels are, where our people are, in terms of their operational, their day. So I think there are real benefits there, and the opportunity for us, I think we're in a reasonably fortunate position that we have access to that large volume of data, terabytes of data, and we've optimized our views on that data around. If you look at the marine side of our business, we're looking at sort of 10 key areas around vessel operations and drilling into those and learning from those environments using our machine learning algorithms to help inform a bit of hindcast, but helping us inform what's happening at the moment on our vessels. So what vessels are outliers? What's that data looking like? So I think there's a real opportunity there to bring, but not to have those tools as something that sits in the back office, right? Have them integrated into one of the key decisions we made in the launch of the ShipShare platform when we relaunched it was to build in pervasive BI. So pervasive BI, pervasive business intelligence, means that people are actually in a real-time business intelligence environment, but they don't know it. Because we're optimizing the information for them at all times, we're giving them balanced scorecards as part of their day-to-day operations there. And then if we can inform that even better using some of our AI solutions, it actually gives real data-driven, informed decisions. Helps them greatly. The path that we're looking at, is for a superintendent to almost have a digital assistant doing a lot of the routine for them, so they can focus on the bigger picture. Yeah. And then ultimately, because it's always my belief, is that's the same for the ship staff. So the captain has a digital captain working away on his behalf and helping him make these informed decisions.
Katie, from a futurist perspective, what's your take on AI and the ability to impact the maritime industry?
I think AI has, some very interesting and very valuable use cases, but they're narrow use cases. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem with AI, that klaxon usually goes off when a futurist says AI.
Exactly.
Just waiting for that, yeah. But what usually happens when we talk about AI is people have read an awful lot about artificial general intelligence. All the machines are going to take over and we're going to lose our jobs and all this kind of stuff. The reality of AI is that we are a very, very, very long way from anything like that. But the use of AI in narrow use cases is an enormous opportunity, as I think Stephen has just very eloquently described. So if we look at AI in the future, I think that what's tended to happen is AI development has sort of stalled for a while, and then it's had a great jump, and then it's stalled for a while. And this is the worry that people say, well, it could have this great leap very shortly. But the likelihood of it doing a leap to where some people think it's going to be is frankly unlikely. The interesting thing that happened during the pandemic, though, and I think this is a real lesson, is that a lot of people had to turn off their AI because AI uses the past to predict the future. Yes. And that means in uncertain conditions, AI can fall over, and it did. And so I think that's a lesson and a good thing for us to bear in mind as we implement AI. And as I think, we've already discussed it, previously, the adaptability, the ability to be agile, actually, not to be locked into systems is very, very important. And I worry a little bit that a lot of the companies, the technology companies that develop these systems, they don't really understand the maritime industry and the shipping industry very well. And that's not just technology companies, it's all maritime suppliers. I'm consistently surprised by how little they understand the business of shipping. And as an aside, I think that's because a lot of these companies have been creating products and services based on IMO mandates because they knew people were going to have to buy them rather than actually understanding their customer. But from the technology perspective, I suspect a lot of these companies think that on a vessel you've got everybody sitting at computers. They don't really understand that the environment on a vessel is maybe you might have a couple of computers, you might have a couple of PCs, that most people are actually doing physical manual work walking around. So when we talk about implementing AI, you have to think about this. This is not in an office. This is not people sitting, with a laptop in their pajamas or whatever. This is actually a working vessel. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect between this idea of what AI can be doing and actually the reality of where it could have a proper use case. And interestingly, Walmart got rid of a lot of its, robots and AI in store recently, you probably know, because people didn't like them. And also they found that they were so expensive to actually maintain, and this is a cost issue as well. You know, what is it? The average seafarer, you know, salary is $600 a month or something. You know, you can get a seafarer for $600 a month. You are not going to get AI and big systems you've got to maintain for that kind of money. And this was the decision Walmart made. You know, what was it? Werner von Braun said that, you know, the best computer is man, and it's the only one that can be mass produced with unskilled labor. Yeah, you know, that still holds true. So is AI important? Yes, it is, but you have to look at the wider investment that you're going to have to make to actually maintain it. Stephen's nodding.
No, but you also have to look at the wider picture, because, you know, the danger, it's exactly what you said. If AI looks at a very narrow vertical, it can come up with a solution and go, look, there's something wrong here. But actually, if it doesn't look horizontally across that data set, because that's where it will be informed properly. And so what we find with quite a lot of sort of AI solutions that are out there is they don't have that horizontal view across the data set. So they're giving you a picture that everybody then just goes, no, that's not right.
And that
then they
undermines
lose
trust.
confidence in it. Yeah,
And the other danger is that you build a model that basically tells you what you already knew. And that's the other challenge. And I chuckled a bit when you said about the data. You know, we in the airline industry, we had to throw out a lot of the models because the traffic patterns have gone to nothing.
And the same with mortgages and lending.
Exactly.
You know, all the furlough schemes meant that people being approved for mortgages, where the banks were saying we could, but the AI said, look, they look great.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end, it all goes back to data. You know, you're only good as the data you collect. You're only good as the folks that you have that can take that data, manipulate it, and do something with it to build a system. I mean, I personally see that, you know, there's lots of opportunities from a data perspective to be able to do process automation, to do some of the smaller things. And obviously, the whole digitization is put you in a position to be able to pivot, to make decisions very quickly, and to do it with facts. So that's definitely one of the benefits from my perspective. Stephen, from a long-term perspective from ShipSure and being able to develop this system over a very long period of time, you know, where do you see the future of ShipSure going and the digitization of V.Group?
So I think, you know, as a tool, it's going to evolve continuously because the industry does evolve. It's actually moving quicker than it's ever moved for 20 or 30 years. I think ShipSure, where I see us moving is the data is going to become closer integrated from ship and shore. Okay, so everyone's going to sit in that really tight ecosystem where actually, you know, it's near real-time data. Okay, got the data security aspect, but I think that's you know, that's something you build into your solution. So I think that therefore means that you're actually extending that whole management cell from ship and shore, tightening it up, allowing them, the ship staff, to make better informed decisions. Okay, because if we talk again, I go back to that sort of circular economy. You know, if the master is more informed about the port congestion because he's getting that information digitally, you know, and the industry matures to the level where actually the master can have a conversation and say, I'm not going to just continue at 14.5 knots because actually I can get here at this point. Data can help that decision, but it's also maturity around the whole approach. So I think you know, more trust in the data, and the data really supporting decision making. So go back to your original point. Is it intuition? It's intuition supported by data.
And I just think it's interesting to pick up as well. We talk about technology and how it might change things, but ultimately the master is still responsible for the vessel. And I think this is something that we tend to gloss over, the idea that everybody's going to have a say and everyone's going to see the data. But you know, at the end of the day, if the master isn't given the confidence in what's going on, it's very difficult for him or her, because actually they take responsibility for all of the things that are happening, even though those decisions may now be, you know, discussed and perhaps even taken not on board the vessel. And that's, I think, you know, we can't get away from that. Ultimately, unless you're going to change that responsibility that the master takes, they have to be absolutely at the heart and soul of where all this comes into, because they're the ones that are going to end up, you know, potentially in court if something does go badly wrong.
So I guess we're reaching the end. I'll let you provide some final thoughts, Stephen, if you can start on data as really a strategic enabler and where you see things going and feel the most excited about.
Yeah, I think I think we're on a really exciting journey. I think there's a real opportunity. Go back to one of Graham's points earlier. We've got to make sure that people come along for that journey. So getting our workforce digitally enabled and aware, I think, is a great opportunity. And taking Kate's point, we know they can now make. We want them to make informed decisions on the same data that we're all looking at. So that's where we want to get to. Is we actually understand why the master made the decision because we've all got the same facts. So that's the opportunity space for us, and use it to become more predictive as ship operators and managers, and put us on the front foot, using data to put us on the front foot around what's happening on the vessel operations. And I think we're getting there. I think we're getting really close, and there's, next few years is a real opportunity for us as an industry.
Yeah.
James, final thoughts?
Yeah, I really echo sort of what Stephen has just said there, and I think data, driving our sort of company forward is a key component within our strategy. And you touched on sort of being nimble, being pivotal. That is going to set aside, if you will, the winners in this industry and those that are going to be lagging behind us. So I think it is going to be an exciting opportunity. Key, observation made by Stephen is that we do need to ensure that we bring our people along. With the development of our strategy towards data and data analytics.
KD, since you're the futurist, it makes sense for you to provide the final comments on the future around data.
Maybe I will try and sort of push the envelope a little bit here. I mean, we tend to be talking about operational data, but actually I think there's an interesting discussion about what other data we haven't seen value in that we may in the future. For example, 2021 marks the beginning of the decade of ocean science, the UN decade, and the World Ocean Council, for example, has a program called Smart Industry, Smart Ocean, and the idea is that they broker scientists who want equipment on vessels and people who run vessels. The idea being that you can actually stream data, not necessarily stream, but at least collect data on the vessel, which you can then provide as a societal benefit, if you like. So maybe let's just think about that in terms of data and offsetting. Rather than planting trees, maybe we could be saying, can we find new value in data that we don't really use operationally as an industry to say, well, maybe we can't fully decarbonise, but maybe we can offset by actually providing some of this data about ocean health, etc. As an opportunity, which I'm quite sure all crews and everyone in the maritime industry would find a meaningful and a purposeful activity, but could also benefit us in a different way. So I would encourage everyone to reframe the way that we look at data, not just how we can reduce costs, but how we can create value, and not just necessarily business value, but societal value as well.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending our data seminar, and pass it back to Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks to all our speakers for a really interesting discussion there. We're going to take a brief break before we move to the next panel discussion on decarbonisation, which starts at 11:15 UK time. So we'll see you back at that time.